Ooh, wasabi guys, is anybody else just pissed off that Captain Crunch has been using the same goddamn puzzles on the back of their boxes for like the past 15 plus years and no one has the balls to say anything about it but me? I mean, what the hell? But anyway, let's talk about 10 more underrated commander cards. They just don't see enough play, or they see very narrow play, and I feel like talking about them because I feel that it's important to get the information about these cards out so that more people play them and more people have budget options and they're not forced to play super expensive cards. That's the whole purpose of this series. Number 10 here is Scour from Existence / Spine of Ishsaw. I didn't feel like making, two separate discussions about these cards because pretty much they're the same card or they have a very similar purpose. It's colorless removal. I feel like Spine is a little bit more flexible and has more playability and more decks just because of the fact that it's an artifact, it's recurable. However, it is also better because if it does go to the graveyard from the battlefield, you can return it to your hand, whereas Scour is just a one-time use. It is, however, instant speed. It can exile any permanent, so you have that benefit there. So definitely very budget options if I had to say so. Mainly going to be for the monocolor decks. Red definitely, maybe green decks that don't have the most versatile removal. I would say red mainly because there's just not a lot of precision in red. So definitely if you're playing mono red and you're looking for a little bit of removal there to add, 7 mana may seem like a lot, but when you consider the fact that it's instant speed to exile any target permanent, I mean, that's good. It is a bit more expensive than you'd like it to be, but it does what it's supposed to do. Next we have Killing Wave. Now it's 1 black and X, and each player, for each creature they control, they pay X life or they sacrifice the creature. That is almost a guarantee to board wipe pretty much everybody. Yeah, you're going to be in a situation where sometimes players are willing to pay like 10 life just to keep a creature, and you're kind of screwed if they do that. But usually, if you have something like infinite mana, or if you have an excess of mana using something like a Cabal Coffers, who knows what else you might be using, that is definitely a way to ensure that they don't have any creatures, and sacrifice removal is some of the best removal out there. This is only for creatures, so keep that in mind. Next we have Thief of Blood. Now when I first saw this, I thought it could definitely see a ton of play, mainly for the fact that just a year later we have an Atraxa deck. We've had popular commanders like Gavegru of Spores. We have Super Friends decks they've been popular for a while now, and anything that interacts with counters, period, which so many decks do, even if this is just a Planeswalker hate card, you're still taking counters from all kinds of permanents. You're going to be taking them away from artifacts. You're going to be taking them away from the vivid lands, just a ton of different options here. A lot of decks play Doubling Season, a lot of decks play counters, period. So when you can take all of those off of them and just put +1/+1 counters onto Thief of Blood for each one, that's really good. Next we have Legion Loyalist. Very good and very underrated 1-drop. I feel aggression is very overlooked in this format, especially when it comes to just small creatures that are deemed insignificant. You're going to be throwing this into a heavy combat deck. Not necessarily goblins, but just anything. I mean, it obviously works well with Boros, but whenever you attack with 2 other creatures, all your creatures gain first strike and trample, and they cannot be blocked by creature tokens until the end of turn. So that is great, and yes, early on, it's not going to be that big of a deal when you're playing a heavy combat deck, whether it's Boros, whether it's Animar, whether it's just anything that's red and it's also playing a lot of creatures. Giving something first strike and trample is amazing. It basically takes away a lot of chump block options, which creature tokens make up a big majority of what people chump block with. So when you take away that, not only do you have that option, you've taken all that away. You force them to block with more significant creatures, and they have first strike and trample, so you're going to run over them. So big card here, very cool, 1-drop. A lot of people overlook it for that factor there, that it's more aggressive, but a very powerful little goblin dude here. Then we have another goblin here, Goblin Sharpshooter. Very good in token-based decks such as Prosh Sky Raider of Care, and as well in Krenko, Mob Boss, or other just Goblin builds in general. Obviously, we have the combos with Basilisk Collar. You can just start pinging creatures. It deals damage to them. It has Death Touch, so those creatures die. It untaps them. It does not untap during your untap step, so keep that in mind. So it is kind of a combo card there with Basilisk Collar, but I really like it because it's very similar to Goblin Bombardment, where you're just going to have this sack outlet with something like Prosh, Sky Raider of Care, and you're just going to start pinging players each time you sack. Even if you just have something else like a Goblin Bombardment or an Ashnod's Altar, just any sack outlet in general, you can just start saving them up and just start pinging players left and right. It's very good, and I think it's always underrated whenever you have something that can just ping players on a stick, and when you can repeat the process because it untaps itself. That's very cool, and I think it's very underrated. Then next we have Flame Shadow Conjuring, the last red card, I promise. And whenever a non-token creature would enter the battlefield, you get to pay 1 red mana, and if you do, you get to put a copy of that creature onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste until end of turn, then at the end step you have to exile it, mainly for your super aggressive decks that want to just apply a massive amount of pressure. Being able to put another copy of that creature onto the battlefield is insane, so you get that usefulness there. It's not a very popular card. I don't see it a lot. Mainly chaotic red decks that they love ETBs, or they just love having aggressive creatures, but mainly for combat decks in general, I think it's a good card. Doesn't see enough play for what it does. We have a lot of clone effects. We have a lot of damage doublers. We have a lot of usefulness in this format that I think that something like this kind of gets overlooked because of that. But I think it's worth a consideration nevertheless. The next we have Miri's Guile. 1 mana green enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to look at the top 3 cards and put them back in any order. The obvious comparison here is Sensei's Divining Top and Sylvan Library. However, both of those are, way better. They're way more abusable. Sensei's can protect itself, and with Sylvan Library, you have the ability to take more than 1 card instead of just looking at the top 3 and putting them back. Miri's Guile is sort of like a Sensei's Divining Top that can't protect itself, but you look at the top 3 there, and you get to put them back in any order. That should never be taken for granted. Very good for just green in general. It's also good if you want to play combo decks and control decks that play green. Can definitely benefit from looking at the top 3, putting them back in any order. You're just looking 3 deep there, and you're deciding, hey, I don't like this, I don't want to draw this, I don't want to top deck this, this is what I want. And those kinds of cards are always good, and I think Miri's Guile just kind of flies under the radar here in Commander. The next we have Sundering Growth, a 2 mana hybrid. So Celestia colors, you can either have the white mana or the green mana there, and you have the option of destroying either an artifact or an enchantment, and you have the populate there. So obvious deck inclusion into something like a Trostani, maybe Eris the Redeemed. Those are the 2 options that come to mind here, and you have the bonus of getting another creature token of your choosing. That's pretty good. So obviously it synergizes best with token builds, but even at its worst, it's still 2 mana instant speed to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It is what it is. I don't really have to go too far into explanation, but it's good, solid removal for just 2 mana. The next we have Immortal Servitude. 3 hybrid mana again, but it's black and white, and you can pay X and return each creature card from your graveyard with X converted mana cost. So it is specific, and you do have to tailor your deck to have a certain number of creatures with that same converted mana cost to make playing this card worth it. That shouldn't be too hard to do. It is still a very good card. Even if you don't have a deck that is tailored to benefit and get a ton of creatures back, you should be able to pinpoint and say, okay, this is the amount of mana that's worth it to bring this creature back. You may be spending a lot of mana, but just to have a card that can bring a creature back at its worst is still good. If you happen to get multiple creatures, even better. Then last we have Gaze of Granite. Golgari colors 3 and an X. You get to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. So it's another mana dump here. You're just going to be putting a bunch of mana into it, hoping that you get the best results. or you're going to be looking at your board state and saying, hey, I can just hinder whatever they're trying to do, because a lot of their permanents are lower CMC compared to what I have, so I can take advantage of that. If it's not like that, you can just dump a lot of mana into it and just basically ensure that nothing survives. Pretty good. Definitely an overlooked card. I think Pernicious Deed is one that a lot more people are willing to play just because it's an enchantment. It sits on the field, and you have options of being political, and you can sort of wait it out. So definitely a good option, though, for removal that not enough people play. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me and this list of 10 underrated commander cards. If you enjoyed it, please like, share it, do whatever the hell you want. You guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off.